ask you to give Mr. Khalik Allah a round of applause and invite him back to the stage. You got your mic on?
Yeah.
All right, awesome.
Thanks, so.
There you go. So again, thank you for being here with us. I think this film is beautiful, but it also reveals some potentially ugly and harsh truths that I'm interested to talk about. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about where you're from and your life a little bit.
Well, I was born and raised in New York. My mother's
Really?
Yeah.
No, I'm just playing.
Somebody at the airport asked me if I had a Southern accent. I said I got a Southern drawl. So even in New York, people say, "Where you from?" Because I don't know, you know. But having a mixed race like a Jamaican mother and Iranian father, you know, gave me a real unique perspective, especially of Jamaica. Jamaica's a place I've been going to all my life. You know, matter of fact, when Trump got elected, I got my citizenship. Just to have a little exit strategy, just in case, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, smart guy.
But, you know, this film, it was about my impressions of Jamaica throughout my life, you know, and, you know, I would go to Jamaica thinking I was going on vacation, but it was like I was going to a temple or a monastery, staying with my grandfather. You know, he would just kind of, you know, pray over me, and, you know, I was like, what is all this prayer? What is all of this? But as I got older, it became more important to me, and I began to record it. That's also why there's so many different formats in the film, because I had been filming throughout the years. But really, since 2015 to 2018, that's when I was dedicated to making this project. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot about me, so I'm just trying to lead it into the film discussion.
Well, so this is your second film,
Yeah.
right? Can you tell us a little bit about your first film?
I made a film called Field Niggas, which I know is a crazy title, but it's coming from a Malcolm X speech called Message to the Grassroots back in 1963, when he was, you know, differentiating the field slaves versus the house slaves, you know. And that film, I shot it on one corner, 125th Street in Lexington in Harlem. And, you know, we all know that, you know, slavery never really ended in America. It kind of just transitioned to prison. And even on the outside, a lot of people are locked up on the outside. And, you know, this corner in Harlem is like one of the last frontiers of gentrification. And, you know, that was my, I did do other films before that, but I would say that was my first film because that was the first time I made a film after becoming a photographer. And photography really informed my filmmaking approach. So, you know, I used to work with Wu-Tang. I did some music videos for them. And, you know, I went on tour with Jizza. I was like filming behind the scenes type of stuff. But that wasn't really aesthetically where I ended up at. You know, that was kind of my college. That was my film school in a sense. Gotcha. So Field Niggas is what I consider my first film, but on IMDb, they got another film that they're saying my first film is, so whatever, but.
Okay. So, like with Field Niggas, in this film, what we see is you being able to connect with people that often are considered marginalized, even outside of the even the most marginalized. But there was a level of comfort and ease that I felt like I saw on screen. Can you tell us a little bit about like your approach? How do you connect with people? How do you get people to open up like this on film?
Well, I mean, it's definitely not easy. You know, you ask a lot of people say no. You know, so you just gotta, you know, persevere through that and continue to ask people. And you know, my thing is I always stress to my subjects how important their opinion is. You know, I focus on them. You know, when I'm filming, I'm not looking off to the side or I'm looking right at them. You know what I'm saying? All my thoughts are focused on what they're saying. I give them the maximum attention that I can. And, you know, I stress to them that their viewpoint is extremely unique and important. And that I'm making a film about what I consider reality, you know. And I need them. You know what I'm saying? So I really stress that to them, that we're co-creators, you know. I mean, some filmmakers will say, or documentary artists will say, I don't pay my subjects. Once you pay your subjects, it's no longer authentic. But because I deal with people that live in poverty, I always hit my subjects off, you know, but it's never like I'm paying them for what they're saying. It's usually after, and they don't know what I'm gonna give them anyway. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it's just $10, sometimes 15, whatever, you know. But I feel because I'm working with so many people that live a street life that I should be blessing them with something. But with that said, many of the people in this film are my family anyhow. You know, that's my grandfather, that was his funeral. You know, my mother was in the film, a lot of my aunts, and, you know, that was another thing. How do I, you know, navigate, you know, including my family, but also the streets and the other aspects, the raw aspects of Jamaica, you know. And, you know, the criteria for that was what parts of my family are universal and applicable to all families. You know, I didn't want to make a biography about my grandfather or my mother, so I left that, all of the biographical information out, and I just focused on the universal aspects of it.
Did you find a lot of experiences and the way that people communicate, the way that people interact with you and others? Did you see a lot of commonalities between you shooting here in America and you shooting over in Jamaica?
Well, shooting in Harlem prepared me, definitely. You know, in the beginning, I was more of a shy person. I didn't want to, you know, break the ice with people and say, yo, I'm doing a project, you know, will you be a part of it? I had to overcome that, you know. For me, the purpose gave me the power or the inspiration to move beyond that shyness. And, you know, I always tell people, even if I'm just taking a portrait of them, I say, hold something in your mind that is meaningful to you, something traumatic or something beautiful that happened in your life, and just hold it in your head and your attention, because I feel like, you know, you give that energy off. I don't want people just looking in the camera smiling, you know what I mean, on some happy-go-lucky type thing, like, you know. So I always try to, you know, not that cliche that a photograph steals people's souls, you know, I don't believe in anything like that, but I feel that, you know, you can give off energy through the way that you're looking, the way that you're thinking, you know. And I'm filming a lot at night, you know, in the streets, and with a Bolex, which is a shiny, antique-looking camera. So I already look like a mark, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, what is this guy doing out here? It's not usual. It's not like the Lower East Side of Manhattan where everybody has a DSLR and they're shooting. You go to Jamaica, you don't see people walking around with cameras just shooting like that. So, you know, it was either I was crazy or I was really invested. You know what I mean? So I was either going to get robbed or respected, you know? But it was just how
for the latter.
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
So,
the latter is what happened the majority of the time. You didn't really have any issues.
It was about just being careful and very respectful, you know, very respectful, and knowing when to leave, not lingering, you know, yeah.
And so what parts of Jamaica are we seeing on screen?
This is actually, you know, a lot different from my first film, which was One Street Corner at Nighttime, 125th and Lex in Harlem, to now an entire island. Because, you know, I had a budget for the first time and I used it. You know, we rented a car and we were all over from, you know, there's two main cities in Jamaica, Kingston and Montego Bay. I filmed a lot in each, and also a lot on the coast and in the interior of the island. You know, my family is from a part called St. Anne's, which is where Marcus Garvey is from as well. Okay. And that's also where the Firewater was shot too. So, you know, there's a lot of country, and I'm juxtaposing all of this, but it's a symphony. It all comes together. Just like there's so many different formats, camera formats, there's so many different parts of the island, but it all came to work together like a symphony.
Agreed. And when you talk about like this spectrum of experiences, you know, this is called Black Mother. We see lots of visual representations of Black women in different spaces. Can you kind of tell me what is it that you were looking to convey to be able to bring a person who may be a street worker, a prostitute, to a person who is selling mangos, to a person who is a holy woman and spends her time in the church. Are you trying to present some level of commonality in that? You know, can you tell us about your approach?
Well,
your intention?
What I'll say is, like, you know, this is a film and it's a photograph and it's never the full truth. It's never the truth. Once you take a picture of something, there's so much outside of the frame that you can't capture. You know what I'm saying? So what a picture is just a sample of reality. It's just a sample of the truth. You know, but it's never the definitive truth. So this wasn't supposed to be a definitive statement on the black woman or the black mother. You know, for me, that title represents so many different things. It represents the island of Jamaica itself, my relationship to it, which is through my mother, and also, you know, a land which has been colonized. You know, when the place has been colonized, it's like it's been raped. You know, and after that, Jamaica is a service economy, so all of the revenue is based off of tourism. So in that way, it's had to sell itself out like a prostitute in a way. So, you know, that sounds harsh, but just through the lens of history, you know, that's kind of what has happened to Jamaica. So I felt it necessary to show how the black woman has been downgraded, but also the praise, and also like the young men who are negotiating, you know, the price of sex, you know, with the sex workers. You know, you see their attitudes, you know, which is also sometimes not so respectful, you know, but it's real, it's raw. There were certain things that I kept in the film which people told me to chop out, like the part where they're discussing the Chinese. You know, some people were like, yo, this isn't gonna go to this festival and this festival because they're gonna say that's racist, but it was a real sentiment of a lot of the rosters who are living in the street. You know, that's what they talk about, you know. So, and again, this is only a sample of that. It's like the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to the story, you know what I'm saying, that I left out. So this movie is like when you go to Jamaica and they fix you a plate of food, there's a lot of food on that plate. You know what I mean? You don't have to eat it all. You may not like it all.
But it's there.
But it's there. That's why this movie is a big plate of food. You know what I mean? And that's why I said in the intro, if you want to drift off or close your eyes or fall asleep even, it'll work on you in a different way, you know?
Did it work on y'all? Yeah. I don't want to hog too much time. I have a few more questions, but I do want to give the audience an opportunity to kind of share their experience with the film, ask you any questions that they might have. Anyone, any thoughts, feelings? You know, one of the things that stuck out to me, and we talked about this a little bit when you were in the lobby, was, and it kind of goes back to this portrayal of women, it's a lot of men talking about women, right? And you talked about how men are negotiating sex and the commodification of the woman. And for me, that's kind of tantamount when they were selling the mammies. And so, you know, making a woman this thing, but then having this thing in the mind where the black woman is held up and the highest valued, and how maybe there's some level of disconnect between the talk and the rhetoric and the actual action. Do you feel like you see that at play quite a bit?
Well, definitely. You know, the funny thing is, in that opening scene where, you know, the man, his name is Roger, was one of my friends actually. He's negotiating the price of sex. I was in touch with the Jamaican Midwife Association, trying to find a woman who would be willing to give birth in the film, and they never wrote me back. They didn't call me enough, and they were like, "This guy wants to film a what? In Jamaica, film a birth?" Like, you know, so that was an insane request to them. So I said to him, like, "Yo, do you know anybody, man, that would be willing?" Like, I gave up on the idea. And I was editing with the guy that scored the film. His name is Fourth Disciple. He is a Wu-Tang producer. And I was like, yo, Fourth, there's a scene that I really want that is proven very difficult. He was like, what is it? I'm like, yo, I want to film a birth. He was like, ooh, you got to do that. You got to get that. So I called Roger, and I'm like, yo, Roger, you know anybody that would be willing, you know, to be filmed in the most intimate part of their life, giving birth? And he was like, oh, my niece.
Just didn't think about it.
Didn't think about it.
Okay.
So that's actually his niece.
Okay.
So I'm just using this story to illustrate how complicated the issue is, you know. Also, this is such a freestyle, this film. I didn't go into it with the intention of making a film called Black Mother. I started off just as with my sensibility of a photographer and was shooting different stuff. And little by little, I was like, yeah, you know, I'm starting to get more of a focus on women, you know. And then I had so much material, I was like, it would be kind of cool if I organized it into trimesters. And then from there, I was like, okay, you know, this is Black Mother. And, you know, I told my little brother, I'm always asking people for advice and what they think, people that I trust, you know. And I said to my little brother, what do you think? He was like, yeah, man. He was in Ecuador drinking ayahuasca when I asked him. So I think that may have affected it because, you know, that's a real feminine, you know, plant medicine too, so.
Okay. I do have a question about the woman, the nude woman, and the gentleman that was with her. Can you tell me about their relationship to one another?
They're actually husband and wife.
Okay.
Yeah, they're actually together. Her name is Jackie, and his name is Junior Ross. So I don't know his government name, but basically I wanted to, you know, show a woman in ownership of her body without, like, you know, also in America, you know, people are afraid of breasts now. Like, it's stigmatized for a woman to breastfeed in public or something, you know? Jamaica doesn't share that. Jamaica, a woman be breastfeeding, nobody will think anything about it. It's just normal. So also when I made the film, it was according to Jamaican standards, not American standards. And that may be off-putting in a sense. I've been showing it all over Europe, showing it all over America. And people have different things to say, but when Jamaicans see it, I noticed that they laugh. They straight talk throughout the whole film anyway. You know? And I'm like, do they like it or not like it? Why are they talking? And then I realized they're just relating to it, you know? And I'm supposed to be going to Kingston next month to play it at the University of West Indies. So I'm a little nervous because this is such a mirror. This is, not everybody likes what they see in the mirror, you know? And it's raw, as you said in the introduction. So, you know, I don't expect everybody to jive with all of it, but I was just trying to make something that was raw, you know? I strayed from your question, so.
No, that was good, because that was my next question. Can you tell us a little bit about how the film has moved around? I know you said that you got some feedback that it might be hard to get into certain festivals. Have you been able to show at festivals? What has the international and national response been like? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I feel extremely blessed that, you know, this project is my second project, and when you make a second project, it's difficult because it's like a second album, sophomore jinx type thing. You know, a lot of rappers run into that when their first project was really good. Some people really like Feel Niggas. That put me on the map. So to follow that up, you know, there was just a lot of pressure, ego illusions that I had to navigate, you know, in order to like make this film. And, you know, between that first film and this film, I did some commercial work. You know, I shot a lot of Lemonade for Beyonce. I shot a commercial for Sonos, and I was moving in that commercial direction where I was beginning to equate the camera with money. So I had to get out of that. You know what I'm saying? I had to like consciously tell myself I want to make something that's just a passion project, because in the future I will do work just for money. Some fake projects that I don't really care about, you know?
Well, Lemonade turned out pretty good.
That was a blessing.
I mean, really, right? Okay, and so when you leave here, Richmond, you go to Sweden, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about where you'll be screening there?
I'm going to be screening in Stockholm, but I just came from Gothenburg, Sweden, earlier this month, and it's been playing in Europe a lot, you know, throughout France and Copenhagen, and the movie actually is almost a year old now. So it premiered March 1st last year at True Falls Film Festival. And since then, it's just been on like a big festival run. And it's finally getting ready to go to Jamaica. And you know, I just came from Jamaica in January, and I didn't bring the camera. It wasn't anything like I was shooting but I brought the film on a laptop, and I was just walking around showing people, you know, and I reconnected with the baby. And they actually made me the godfather of the baby. Yeah.
Right.
And if you notice, the baby came out mad light skinned.
Yeah.
So they thought it was my baby. You know what I mean? They thought it was mine. And yeah,
You had to figure that out.
I feel like me and that baby had a connection, some sort of spiritual connection, like, you know, because even when I seen her this time, she just kind of jumped in my arms, and, you know, I was like, wow, we took some pictures together, and she's 2. You know, February 20th, she turned 2. Okay. So, and the movie, the funny thing is the movie was complete February 20th last year, and then it went to True False on March 1st. So it's just been a blessing, man. It's been a huge blessing for me. And while I was making it, because of the title, my mother thought I was making a film about her. And then she sees it, and she's like, oh, because we never talk about, you know, the elements of this film, you know, like we never had conversations about sex or prostitution or the gritty side of Jamaica. I'm just an innocent little son, you know? And then she sees the film and it's like, wow, this dude is on drugs, this dude is smoking weed.
I mean, but how did she feel about that? How did she feel about that depiction of Jamaica? You know, as someone who grew up in the space and maybe holds it, has a certain lens of it and holds it in her heart in a certain way. How did she feel?
Well, for her it was different because that was her father, you know, in the film, who was a prominent figure in the film. But she told me that she liked it. You know, she wasn't, you know, put off by any of it. She told me it was like honest depiction. She told me that like it probably could have been depicted a lot worse, you know, if I wanted to. Yeah. But again, like, you know, there's political concepts, like the first trimester is more topical, what people may expect, people dancing in the street. I'm establishing the church in the first trimester. I'm establishing a lot of stuff, talking about food, the fruits. Then by the second trimester, it's a level deeper. Now we're talking about colonialism and skin bleaching and, you know, different aspects of that. And then by the third trimester, it's in that spiritual realm, which I really wanted to get to from the beginning. But I had to have this exposition first before I could get to that spiritual part. I couldn't really have just started out like that. So the film ultimately, yeah, it contains these political concepts and the struggle, but I was trying to eclipse all of those concepts by the ending. So when you leave this film, you more feel it, like, and also it was made to watch a second time and a third time, and because it's so dense, there's so much in the project, and you got the audio and the video, and, you know, it's a film to like meditate to, you know.
You know, you said something earlier that I say often. You said it's more cerebral, it's less cerebral and more of a chest thing. And I say, you know, it's important to create things that connect with the heart space more than the head space sometimes. And I do think that this does that. And I think that letting people know that watching the film more than once can have a particular benefit. So let me ask you, if a person wanted to watch this again, how could they? Well,
now it's being distributed through Grasshopper in the U.S. So DVDs will be available soon, and I got a big New York release coming up in March. But it'll be available on iTunes and online pretty soon. So, you know, I have people kind of helping me out with a lot of stuff, and it's a blessing, like, to have that support, because when I started out, there was no support, you know, and when you're just beginning as an artist, you don't think that there's all this structure out there which would help you. At least I didn't, you know. I was just, as you see, like, I shot, directed, and edited myself because I come from doing that without thinking that I would get help. But now I'm trying to go into fiction narrative films. I want to write a script, and I'm going to have people like an editor and some other cinematographers and people helping me write and stuff like that, because after kind of like proving the concept, you know, now people want to help me. So that's what it takes. Like, you got to just do a bunch of work on your own first, and then,
that's right,
you know.
I know, trust me. Any questions? Okay.
You know, when I first read about this viewing here, I saw the title Black Mother and everything, I read about Jamaica, so I kind of like formulated what I thought the movie would be about. because that was more important than what it means to me. And you said that it's gone through, you know, Europe or whatever. And you current. While I was watching the movie, I saw black people and I saw Jamaica, but I got a more feel it was a universal connection with people. I mean, people all over the world are oppressed. There's poverty and marginalized people everywhere. So I came in thinking it was a black thing, but as I watched the movie, I thought it was more universal. And then the spirituality in the movie, which I think is a universal thing. Now, I'm not talking about the religious aspects, because that really kind of turned me off to the religious aspects, but the spirituality and everything. So I just wanted to know how the rest of the world, like you said, you go Europe, but how do they connect with it? Do they look at it as a Jamaican thing, or black thing, or more as a universal expression?
Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, that means so much that that's how you took it, that's how you interpreted it, because I've been to all black audiences. I played the movie in Curacao, I played in Trinidad. I played it in Miami at a Third Horizon Film Festival, which is mainly a Caribbean film festival, mostly Jamaicans there. And then I played it in places where it was all white people. You know, I played it in places where it was like mostly women, other places mostly men, some places older people, some places younger people. And usually what I've noticed is people usually laugh at the same time, regardless to who they are. They usually have a similar emotional response, similar questions during the Q&A. So what it's taught me is that people are more similar than different, definitely. And you know, when I was making the film, it wasn't any type of limitations that I was putting on my subjects or saying it was just like this or like that. Even to touch on that spiritual aspect, which you just mentioned, you know, you don't have to be a Christian to vibe off of this. You don't have to be a Muslim. You know, my name is Khalik Allah. You know, and I made a film with a heavy Christian theme, but I look at the religions like water companies. You know, you got Dasani, Fiji, Aquafina, Poland Spring, Avion, whatever this is. You know what I'm saying? But they all contain the same thing. You know what I'm saying? So the packaging, the container doesn't really matter. You know, so in this film, I was trying to go beneath the surface and beyond the containers to the universal aspect of it. Like, you know, you may be able to find a pure spring busting out of the ground in your backyard, just drink from that, you know, and to me that pure spring is spirituality, because a lot of us are dehydrated spiritually. You know, we're starving spiritually, so we turn to relationships. We think we need a relationship, or we need drugs, or we need something else because there's a void in us that we're trying to fill unconsciously, you know. So I feel like, you know, also relationships are like more horizontal, from person to person on the x-axis, whereas, you know, there's a relationship that is lacking a lot because, you know, it's vertical, but we're distracted by the horizontal one, and that vertical relationship is more spiritual. That's your relationship with God. That's your relationship with yourself, which is, you know, with the universe. So this was an attempt to give people that, you know, even if they don't know that they were dehydrated, you know. So it was like also a form of baptism, you know, gentle baptism in a sense. You know, where you know, there's some sort of quote, I don't know exactly how to say it, but it says, a mind once stretched by an idea never returns
to its original form. I think it's Einstein.
Oh.
That's what the internet says. That's what Instagram says. Yeah.
But that's kind of what I wanted to do with this. Like, no matter what, after you see it, it worked on you in some way, on some soul level. Yeah. You know, so, but thank you for that, bro.
Because that human connection, I mean, that is a spiritual connection. That's you seeing you and somebody else, even though the layers, you know, that surface thing might be different. You know, so I think just in and of itself, your comment shows the spiritual energy that you're able to pick up from this. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, I agree with everything this young man here says, Tony. I've been all over the world, And every time I go to a different place, even Jamaica, I love going to mingle with the people of that community. Your film hit home. I've been to Jamaica, I've been to Kingston, I've been to Falmouth, Jamaica, I've been to Montego Bay, Jamaica. But see, we as Americans, we don't take the time to understand the culture of places we go. South Africa is one of the places that I visited 5 years ago. And to get out there, to mingle with the people and see how they live, gives me a greater appreciation for what we have here at home. But I commend you, excellent job on what you've done with that. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Well, it's just to comment on what you said, like even now in Jamaica, because it is a service economy and, you know, all of the revenue is based off of tourism, they're trying to keep people off of the streets. They're trying to direct people to Sandals Resort, all-inclusive resort, where there's a beach, there's food, there's coconuts, fruits, everything is there, so you never have to leave. Right. They don't want people out in the streets anymore.
To see a reality.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we even see that in American gentrified spaces, you know, trying to keep the hipsters and the people who are new to these urban settings in particular places, trying to push certain people out to the outskirts so that it doesn't mess with the experience, this experience that they're looking to create, that's not always based in reality, and wants to hide the reality that even though something can really be really beautiful on the top, that there are underbellies that exist, right? And that we have to create space to expose those underbellies so that the conversation of equity, you know, you can't really have a real conversation of equity and creating opportunities for people if you continue to keep the underbelly in the dark. You know what I mean? So I appreciate you with this film, because for me, what I see is an exposure of an underbelly that oftentimes we seek to hide, and we even hide ourselves from, you know, because it's a harshness that we don't know how to encounter as individuals, because if it hits you in the right place, it makes you realize that you're supposed to do something maybe. What is that thing? What is your personal responsibility? You know, because individuals create the collective. You know, so what is our contribution? And sometimes we don't want to ask ourselves those hard questions, you know?
And, you know, and when you look at it, when you're going on a cruise or when you're going directly to a resort, that's the first thing they try to do, keep you confined.
Yeah.
Okay? They don't want you to see those places.
That's right. They don't. This young lady here, then we'll come here.
Hi. I wanted to say I really appreciate the film. It's very, very beautiful. But I was wondering, so I think for marginalized communities, viewing it is very different than other communities. And so like with this giving birth scene, for example, like I really loved how you juxtaposed it with the nature and the water. It was very, very it was very beautiful and moving. But in a lot of the uglier scenes, you kind of do that, where you juxtapose it with nature or something beautiful to kind of complement it. But I was wondering, for the communities that aren't marginalized and don't really understand the experience, how do you feel kind of perpetuating the like poverty in Jamaica, you know? Where it's like, you're like, that's what you're shedding light on, which is a significant part of it. But it's also like, in the more affluent countries, when they view it, it's like perpetuating that same thought process that they probably already had of that country.
Great question. Yeah, it's hard because, you know, when you make a film, you want it to screen all over. You want it to get a wide release. And yeah, of course, you want it to go all over the world, you know. But it is kind of weird, you know. Like, for instance, I went to, you know, England, and the British colonized Jamaica.
Yeah.
You know, so when they see it, their response is like, damn, they may feel guilty. I don't want them feeling guilty either, though. You know what I'm saying? You know, the movie wasn't intended to make people feel guilt. This isn't, you know, religion, so to speak, like in the form of the guilt that it perpetuates at times. But to them, their response was like, damn, you know, this is a result of what we did, you know? But my idea, I can only hope that it translates to people, because I'm trying to show the richness amidst the poverty. I'm trying to show the resurrection, not the crucifixion. You know, the poverty in a sense could look like the crucifixion, but when you see the happiness in the people despite the poverty,
Yeah.
that's like the resurrection.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm trying to eclipse all that darkness with the light, you know, that's in there despite the circumstance, because these folks in my film are extremely happy.
They are.
You see the man with tattered clothes, and he's doing these crazy yoga poses in the street, and, you know, the 9 bingy throwing it up, and you can tell this dude is at peace with himself. There's millionaires who aren't at that level of peace
Yeah.
and self-realization, you know? So we're living in a very complicated world where judgment is futile, you know, and we can't judge anything based off of the circumstance or the top layer of things, because we really don't know. The face value is so deceptive that, you know, all we could really do is look inward and see where we're at and try to, like, you know, I think judgment anyway is an ego device.
For sure.
You know, the alternative is acceptance, regardless to what things look like. Just accept it. Not saying like injustice, you know, because things need to be corrected, of course. But I mean acceptance in the sense that trusting that we don't know, being okay with not knowing, right? Like even in school, we're given, you know, in elementary school, those fill in the blanks exercises. Those aren't really good because that translates to our adulthood. When we don't know something, we need to know. So we fill in the blank what we think the answer is, which is usually some sort of judgment, you know,
Yeah.
which is not based in truth. So, you know, I mean, I'm not in control of people's interpretation of it, and that's also why separating the audio and the video is a device which brings the audience in to participate with the film. So it forces the audience to form their own association. You're hearing something and you're seeing something, and it makes you say, okay, how do I associate what I'm hearing and seeing? And it kind of is an invitation for you to form your own interpretation of it, and not to say this is the truth, not this is the truth, you know? But it's hard though, like as an artist, you want your work to be shown, you want it to go out there, but you also got a responsibility to yourself and to your upbringing and to your own impressions of life, and you want to portray that. So my thing is just do that regardless. Just do that fearlessly, because, you know, fear is the first thing which prevents people from doing them, you know, considering what other people would think. You just got to have respect for other people's opinions, but still just do you, you know. Not everybody is going to get it, you know what I'm saying?
And I think intention is everything. And I think that when I see the film, I do see the intention of wanting to extract the beauty, but yes, still tell a particular truth. I do think it's interesting that when certain audiences see it, it might conjure up feelings of guilt. And I appreciate that that's not the goal, because the film would look very different if that was the goal.
Right.
It would feel very different if that was the goal. But for that to be an unanticipated response, I think I'm okay with that, because, you know, I think that there's a space for, because guilt equates to acknowledging a certain level of responsibility, right? And so I think it's what people do with guilt that matters, right? So, you know, the guilt is the feeling of acknowledgement, and it can conjure up anxiety and fear. And if your ego leads, it can cause you to become defensive. But if your ego takes a back seat, then that guilt can maybe lead you to think of ways to respond with compassion and maybe try to fix an issue. And so I would love for that to be something that comes out of people seeing these depictions of what colonialism and, you know, race-based oppression has done, you know, because it doesn't just live in Jamaica, you know,
Right,
as the
right.
gentleman was saying. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so Richmond is also a tourist place. And I think we see things here that are done, Richmond is a tourist place, and we see things that are done here to try to hide things, to try to push people away. I would say, in some ways, you know, the Pulse bus system and the attempt to get the regular, everyday bus rider off of Broad Street is an example of that, but
Agreed.
there's lots of others. I really appreciated about your film, instead of looking at people in difficult circumstances, a certain amount of poverty, living with a certain amount of oppression, instead of presenting them as somebody to pity, to feel sorry for, that you really gave their full voice. And so that we can see that, no matter where you are in life, that human part. So I think it is a very universal film because you took that approach. And my own sister did home birth twice. So I really appreciated the way you approached that. I think it was a very respectful way of doing something which, in this country is people, by and large, are still very uncomfortable with. In many countries, that's pretty much the way it happens. But I really appreciated that respectfulness approach there.
Thank you. I walk a lot in the woods, and I'm always thinking, like, what do I want to do next? A lot of people now are asking me what's my next project, but I realize that I got to stay in this lane of positivity. I can't really step out of this lane and make some shoot 'em up type movies. And I want to even if I make work that's unpopular, I'm okay with that. Like, it may be, popular in the future or something like that, but that's not my intention. My intention now is to stay on this path, because I feel like all of us have a purpose in life. My personal belief is that even before being born, there's a life contract that we've agreed to, which says that we're supposed to do X, Y, and Z. There's certain people we're supposed to meet. There's certain functions we're supposed to fulfill. And, I used to think filmmaking was boring. I used to think photography was boring. But when I went more inward and developed more spiritually, then it became a dissemination point for me to now use the camera for this purpose. And that gave me like an impetus to continue going. So, I realize now, like, I want to make films about family, about relationships, about healing, about God. When we see God in a film, usually it's a horror movie, and it's in some demonic way, like The Exorcist with the cross and crazy stuff. Like, We don't really see God in a good sense. And family too. God and family are becoming so unpopular in a sense in the world. So it was almost radical to include a film with prayers like that, But I don't know what I'm gonna do next, but I want to continue. And your comment is more encouragement. And I want you guys to know, like, when I am walking, when I am just sitting back at home, I think about what people told me. You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that was a good point. It's not always love, though. You know what I'm saying? But most of the time it is. So I'm grateful.
Well, hopefully he'll come back and share his next work with us, right? Can you pass your mic to the young woman behind you? Thank you.
I don't know how to frame my comment, but I'm going to return to the actual film. I love the scenes where the person just stood there, not moving, barely blinking, and with very calm.
Kind of stoic. Are you talking about the young woman with the fur hat on?
There were tons of them. There were so many of them. And could you talk a little bit about that? I just thought those were really beautiful, and they kind of they drew me in a lot more than some of the other things.
Well, this is a photographer's documentary. Really. In 2010, I became a photographer after I had done a project with Wu-Tang that never really went anywhere, any festivals, anything like that. But it took me 4 years to make it. And after those 4 years, I was tired of filmmaking, and I got into photography. And then after working with photography for like 4 years, I got back into filmmaking, and my approach was a lot different, and I began shooting out of sync. And because I'm shooting out of sync, a lot of the work is portraits. So my direction to the person is like, yo, I'm just taking a video of you. I'm just taking a picture of you. And because of that, I'm not telling them what to do or walk this way or something. So I just leave them, I give them more like a psychological direction where I say, think about something profound. And this is what I'm doing. I'm making a film about this. Just think about this. And it's pretty interesting, like what you get when you do that, because, you know, in the case of the woman with the fur, she didn't blink once.
Not once. It was amazing.
Yeah, and it worked. Like it worked like, you know, my work is really predicated on trust. Trusting with my subjects, between my subjects and myself, but also trusting my sensibility as a filmmaker, as an artist. And I don't know where things are gonna fit together. So you'll take a scene like the, you know, there's a comment that a man is making about women who eat in the country,
Yeah.
compared to women that eat KFC.
And Burger King, yeah.
And what I'm showing at that time is the visuals are a family of women who are running a shop, and their facial expressions are like, what is this guy talking about? Like, you know what I mean? But they were shot totally separate, totally different. So that's in the editing. A lot of my directing is in the editing, actually. You know, I shoot a lot of stuff, and then it becomes like Tetris when I'm editing, just fitting pieces together.
Right. But you did a good job of that. You know, there are some moments where you play off of the words in like these really direct ways that I think are beautiful. But to this woman's point, so I think those moments do draw you in. And there were certain ones that drew me in even more than others. So the young woman with the blue and the fur hat, she is one of my favorite people in the whole film. But this time watching it, there was a young woman, I noticed this young woman who was sitting on the curb. She had on like white and like polka dots, and her hair was in a ponytail. And there was like, I felt anger and maybe fear, and maybe like even looking, should I trust this person who's filming me? Do you remember that experience directly? Can you talk to that? Because I think we got so much truth and purity in those moments. And so thank you for bringing that up, because I mean, she was one that really stood out to me today.
Definitely. I mean, it goes back to what I was mentioning earlier about it not being common for people to just be photographing and filming like that. You know, if it's not like a music video or something like that, if it's a documentary like this, it's a little rare. You know, I mean, I've never seen a film about Jamaica that wasn't about reggae, you know, or marijuana specifically, or Bob Marley, or these different tropes. So, you know, people were very suspicious at times. You know, I would say, oh, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to depict street life, or I want you to tell me about your experience, you know, in the city, you know, and some of your struggles. And they'd be like, why? You know, in the case of that woman, yeah, I think she was just like curious and a little suspicious. And I appreciate all of these emotions that the people give me, because again, it's all useful. It becomes a color, it becomes a texture that I can play with in the editing. So, you know, there's certain scenes where people are kind of just ice grilling the camera. And I'm thinking like, damn, this person, you want to rob me or what? But I never tell them to stop, because I'm like, okay, I could use that somewhere in the film, I don't know, but it'll become useful. Yeah, you know, in her case, that's kind of all I could say about that. You know, maybe she was just a little suspicious, like, because it's so unusual.
Yeah. You have a question? Oh, okay. Anyone else? Well, I invite you all to tell someone about this film, to let them know that they can find it online, and to keep a lookout for it at different festivals. You know, travel and go see it. See what another audience, how they ingest it, how they what the filtration system is that they take it through. It might expand your experience that much more. But this has been a beauty of a film for me, and a wonderful experience to be able to talk to Khalik about his process. And of course, it's always a pleasure to connect with you all and hear what you have to say. So I thank you all for coming out, and please join me in thanking Khalik once again.
If anybody wants to email me, you know, it's just my name at Gmail, Khalik Allah at Gmail. You know, when I was coming up, and I'm still coming up, but I used to reach out to all these different people, and sometimes they never hit me back.
Yeah.
So now I take that very seriously, like anybody that I could help, or, you know, even just if it's a discussion or whatever, you know, so that's always important to me. So yeah, reach out to me, stay up, and give me like another year, and I'll have another film.
He'll be back. That's what he's saying. Again, I invite you guys to check out the exhibitions that are going on in the building. A lot of this conversation has been, to me, rooted in this idea of generosity. Even that, to share his email address with the audience, is this really generous mentality. And you'll see the same mentality at work in the first floor gallery with Colleen Smith. The idea of radical generosity is at the root of her work as a Black woman, using models from the past to help us shape what a future can look like through this lens of, yes, radical generosity, and not just inclusiveness, but what does it look like for somebody else to take the front seat and drive what the future can look like. And so it's a totally immersive experience. It's very different than anything that we presented here at the ICA, even down to the way that the actual gallery is set up. You know, we have created walls and nooks to add texture to the experience. And so I invite you to really check that out, as well as Dialogues and Rashid Johnson, and let us know your thoughts. You know, let us know, is this the sort of work you want to see? Does it respond, is it reflect any aspect of your experience? Does it respond to something that you think is important? I'm excited about what we have going on in the building, but I love to hear what you guys have to say as well. Again, we'll be here on the second Wednesday, March 13th. Adoma Akosua Owusu. She's a Ghanaian American filmmaker. She's amazing. I have a film festival called Africana. She's come to that and share some of her work. And so I'm excited to have her come here and share her work with us through this short film showcase called Triple Consciousness. Tell somebody, bring somebody, okay? All right, thank you.
Awesome. Appreciate you.
Thank you, same. Oh, amen.